Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix was released in 2007 and was directed by David Yates. And in this movie, Harry deals with the fallout of Voldemort's return as he feels more isolated than ever, but his friends and family will make him realize that he doesn't have to face it alone. I have a lot to say about this movie because this is really the turning point of the franchise. It's no longer the fun, adventurous thing. Once Voldemort returns and kills Cedric Diggory, it's become a very serious young adult, franchise. And I think that was really important for Harry Potter, as that's what happens in the book. From Order of the Phoenix on, it becomes a super serious book. Although Half-Blood Prince, it's actually probably the funniest book and the funniest movie, but other than that, it really takes a darker, much more serious tone, and I have a lot to say because I recently finished the book, I recently finished the series, so I'm actually surprised how much they took liberties from the book and kind of changed a lot of things, but that's a lot, but let's just talk about it. Also, from here on out, all of these movies are directed by David Yates, so he took over from Order of the Phoenix all the way to the Deathly Hallows Part 2, and for the most part, they're fine. From a movie perspective, they're good, but they really take a lot of direction change from the books. And look, as the series goes on, the books get longer and longer and longer. This is actually the longest book out of the entire series, and probably this takes the most liberties, and they really change a lot and take out a lot of crucial details that make that book the most detailed and most fleshed out, and this movie kind of suffers for it. Let's start with the positives, and the biggest positive is Imelda Staunton. Hopefully I said your name right. I apologize if I said it wrong. She plays Dolores Umbridge. Oh my lord. What a character. Now let me just say, from a book perspective, I absolutely hated the first half of the book, and it's not because it was bad, it's just it was so miserable and so sad and just brutal to get through because Harry feels isolated because he just is completely alone. He's staying at the Dursleys and nobody's contacting him. He doesn't know what the heck's going on. Then he finally goes to Hogwarts after all that mess is over with the Dementors. And he deals with Umbridge, who just completely ruins school. She's so annoying and evil and just horrible in every single way, and you don't want to deal with her. So the entire first half of the book is meant to feel like this just horrible feeling. You just feel constant sadness and dread. It's like Dementors are surrounding you as you turn the page. In the same way with the movie, the first half is just so brutal because Dolores takes she is such a huge presence in this movie. She becomes the overall villain in this movie. As much as Voldemort is the overall the big baddie, this movie really centers around one villain. That is Dolores Umbridge. I know Voldemort takes over at the end, but for the most part, we hate her, and we can agree that we hate her just as much as Voldemort. I would rather work for Lord Voldemort than under Dolores Umbridge, and that's really saying something because, man, Voldemort is like one of the most evil, horrible people to ever exist. But man, Dolores Umbridge, all that pink, that voice, the cats, and the pink, I can't handle it. She did a fantastic job of just us hating her guts, every delivery of the line. She honestly did better in the movie than they used her in the book. In the book, she's just awful. You just can't help. But for some reason, the way they made her in the movie, it's like there was just something about her that you just liked about more in the movie than in the book. I can't explain it, but just the way she performed, it brought this charisma and this flair and just this evilness that was just a lot better than in the book. And like I said, this movie really centers around the villains. I mean, you get Bellatrix Lestrange for the first time. You get to see more of Lucius Malfoy. You get to see Voldemort a lot in Harry's dreams. Then you get Dolores Umbridge. This is really a villain movie. Even though Harry and the Order of the Phoenix and the whole DA, all that stuff going around, for some reason, this is where a big turning point in the movies is for me, because they fleshed out our big three in Harry, Ron, and Hermione over everybody else. Our heroes turn out to be very boring, especially in the DA meetings when they're doing all that. It's really cool. Ginny's nice, Neville's great, but other than that, everybody kind of sucks. But I do love me some Luna Lovegood. She also is a huge positive. I absolutely adore her character. I loved her in the book, and I absolutely love her even more in the movie. And a fantastic performance, by the way. She easily became a fan favorite, and she is one of my favorite Harry Potter characters. So she helped out the supporting cast of heroes, but because nobody else was really fleshed out, it really suffered in the DA meetings, because it was supposed to be truly differing opinions on if this is right, how they should do magic, all that stuff. But instead, everybody just kind of listen to Harry, and that was kind of it. The relationship between Harry and Sirius is very important. It probably is the heart of this film, even though the villains are the center of attention. I think the true beating heart of this film is Harry's relationship with Sirius. It is his last family member left. So even though I'm going to talk about in my negatives, we did not get enough of Sirius. I think Gary Oldman's Sirius was fantastic, and I loved the scenes they have together. And especially when you see that 20-year reunion that they had, you clearly see that Gary Oldman and Daniel Radcliffe have so much chemistry, so much love for each other, and that really translated well on screen. So the minimal amount of scenes that we got, they were done well for the most part, and when Sirius, unfortunately, spoiler, if you haven't read the book or watched the movie after all these years, when Sirius dies and Harry is so distraught, you can't help but feel that. You know, the emotions come from reading the book, and of course the emotion on Daniel Radcliffe's face, and you just hate seeing Bellatrix, that face she makes, you just want her to die. But no, that was really great chemistry between Sirius and Harry, and I really like the relationship that they did, even though we should have had way more. One thing I noticed that I really liked about this movie is that there's really a lot of spells being used. Now, the reason why I say that is, besides the first film, where it's the first time you're seeing Hogwarts and all the classes, you don't really see a lot of spells being used. Now, the reason why it kind of irks me a bit is that you would think that if you go to a school like Hogwarts, you literally turn a corner and see like people just doing spells on each other non-stop. But you don't really see that a lot. It's almost like it's a normal school at this point, which kind of bothers me. You know, if you didn't see the classes and the terms that were being used, you would never have assumed this is a magic school. Because honestly, if I was at Hogwarts and I had a wand, I'd be using spells non-freaking-stop. That's just me, personally. But we do see a lot of spells being used. The DA meetings, you get to see a lot of diversity of spells. It's not just Expelliarmus and Avada Kedavra. You actually get to see a lot of cool stuff. And I think that's so important when you go to Hogwarts to see a diversity of spells. So I do appreciate David Yates for doing that, and I do appreciate the book for emphasizing more and putting more of a perspective and a priority on spellcasting. And now for the negatives. Oh my lord, they leave out a ton from this book. It's absolutely worse than Goblet of Fire. I thought Goblet of Fire was bad. This, I don't know what David Yates and the writers were thinking. How could you leave out so many of these crucial scenes? I get it. You can't use everything. But this movie's only 2 hours and 18 minutes. I know that seems long, but trust me, with the amount of movies that we've done, like you look at Avengers Endgame and all this stuff, how is it you couldn't make this like a 2 hour, 30-minute movie? Heck, even 3 hours. Like, people gladly watch Lord of the Rings, 3 hours, a 4-hour cut. Why couldn't we get 4-hour cuts of each movie? I would happily buy it and watch it every single day. So going back to my positives, I do like Sirius and Harry together, but a negative is that Sirius is not in this movie enough. He's not in this franchise enough. Ever since he returned in Prisoner of Azkaban in the books, from Prisoner of Azkaban to Order of the Phoenix, he is such a big part of the books. Like, you see him a lot in Goblet of Fire. You see him a lot in Order of the Phoenix. You don't see him at all. Like, it bothers me so much how you don't see a lot of scenes with Harry and Sirius. Their conversations are so important because the reason why is because Harry is so isolated in this movie. So when he finally talks to Sirius, the one person he wants to talk to, you just see this glimmer of hope come from Harry. How he's like, I want to live with you. I want to stay with you. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your life. Tell me about my dad. That's so good. You get to see more character, work from Harry and Daniel Radcliffe when they're together. But because you take that away, you take away the importance of their relationship, so that when Sirius finally dies, it just hits you even more. Again, it hits you really bad because you love Gary Oldman and you love Daniel Radcliffe and you love Harry, but I just feel like it could have had a bigger punch if he was in the freaking movie more. I really think the biggest negative of this movie, though, is Harry's mental health journey. From a book perspective, because it's so long, you really get to see Harry unravel as the book goes on. I mean, you're talking about fallout from Cedric's death. He's not made a prefect. He's completely isolated from his friends and family. Albus Dumbledore's not talking to him. He's having nightmares non-stop about his friends being dead and about how he's seeing what Voldemort is doing. Then he can't cast spells in defense against the dark arts, so he can't fight. Then he has the stress of leading Dumbledore's army. Then he has the fallout from Cho's relationship that was doomed from the start. You just see this domino effect that's happening throughout the movie. But because the movie is not really paced out that well, you can't really, it just doesn't do it that well because, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, the entire dream thing that he has with Voldemort, they completely changed it from the book. The book was completely different and actually a lot better than what it was in the movie. In the movie, it's just Harry being possessed by Voldemort in some form or fashion, but this is different in the book, and it really bothers me how much they changed it, and I hated what they did for that. So take, for instance, in the movie, Harry is having nightmares about, he's just seeing Voldemort everywhere at the train station. When when he's looking in the mirror, all of a sudden his face becomes Voldemort's face. It's like, in a weird way, it's kind of teasing that, like, Voldemort is trying to possess Harry in some form or fashion because he keeps twitching and he's, like, yelling out erratically. It's just showing his anger. And I think, in a way, what they were writing towards, especially at the end when Voldemort possesses him for half a second, it really felt like it was Voldemort trying to possess Harry more than Harry seeing Voldemort's, what he's doing. So in the book, what Harry is going through is that, yes, he's having nightmares, but he's seeing what Voldemort is seeing. So it establishes that there's a connection. There's some sort of connection between Harry and Voldemort. And Harry, starts to see what's happening. And it's affecting his mental health. It's affecting him personally. And everybody sees it. Dumbledore's like, you need to take these classes with Snape, which is why he has to take those classes. But he decides to take the burden for himself and says, no, it's too important to see what he's doing. Especially after he saves Ron's dad from being dead by Nagini. He decides, okay, I'm going to take this burden on myself, not tell anybody, and just get in Voldemort's head. It's going to hurt me. It's going to really affect me and my mental health, but I have to do it because I have to beat this guy no matter what the cost, because he's going to keep coming for me, and this is the only way to beat him. I think that was really important in the book because it shows that Harry is doing whatever it takes to beat Voldemort. And yes, he's isolating himself more and more from his friends, and at the end he makes up with them. But in the movie, it just really felt like Harry didn't really have a choice. It was just, oh, he's just being possessed by Voldemort, and it's all about friendship that will stop the possession and love. And I get it, love is important, but I just feel like this movie was really centered around mental health, and I think they did a poor job of that. And let's talk about Voldemort again. Look, I'm going to double down in what I said from my Goblet of Fire review. I don't like this performance. I just don't think that's Voldemort. Voldemort's supposed to be cold and calculating, but instead, he literally has two spells. He literally is saying Avada Kedavra in the worst enunciation possible, or he's just yelling. So it's just Avada Kedavra. It's just like those are literally the two things he does. Like I said, and it's not a good performance. And because Umbridge is, and this is the same problem I have with the book, because Dolores Umbridge takes such just a vice grip on this book and how bad she is, you don't really care that much about Voldemort anymore. Which kind of sucks because, Voldemort is supposed to be your big bad villain, but when you bring somebody in like Dolores Umbridge, it is no longer your movie. It becomes Umbridge's movie. Which is why, from a rewatchability perspective, it's not that fun to watch because Umbridge is such a pain to listen to and watch. But it does also suck from a writing and movie perspective that Umbridge was a bigger villain than Voldemort. And like I was talking about character development, I think Neville is such an underrated character. He's used really well in the book, but in the movies, he's not used at all. It's really a shame because he is one of the best stories. It really becomes the prophecy. He is part of the prophecy. It was either Neville or Harry, and their lives would have been totally different if Voldemort went after the Longbottoms instead of the Potters. Which is why I feel like I'm so bothered why they decided to take out St. Mungo's. Like, that is such an important part of the book. Why would you completely get rid of that? I think I read that they did film a scene. They just decided to not put it in. Why would you do that? Why would you take out such an important scene? You get to see Gilderoy Lockhart again, which is a funny little Easter egg. But of course, you get to see Neville's parents and just how far gone they are. And of course, you get to see Neville's grandma. That's such an important part of the book because it fleshes out Neville's character. Like, people looked at Neville in the book as like a loser. Like, he's just weird. He's got a toad. He's kind of weird. That's Longbottom. But because of that scene and a bunch of the Gryffindor house members there, it really changes everybody's perspective on Neville. And I think that's such an important thing to show. But they didn't. It's just Neville and Harry having a heart-to-heart in the room a requirement. And it's only Harry that knows. Nobody else knows Neville's struggle. And I think that's so important that everybody in Gryffindor knew because they were kind of treating him like he was a joke. But I just hate that they did that to him because Neville is such an important part of this series. And David Yates, look, he's not a bad director, and I just feel like he made a poor decision leaving out Neville's character work. There's also some slight nitpicks I also have. I mean, take for instance, like, Minerva McGonagall and Dolores Umbridge's, like, sparring. The verbal sparring that they have in the book throughout is so good. They have a couple in the movie, but man, like, when Harry, my favorite one is when Harry's going to, like, basically, like, career day where he's like trying to figure out what he's trying to do, and you see McGonagall talking and like trying to figure it out, and then Umbridge just keeps butting in, and they just keep doing passive aggressive insults to each other. I loved every second of it, and I just wish they put that in. And another slight nitpick is that I don't get it. Like, when you see the entire school just hating Umbridge, like when she takes over, nobody likes her. Only Fred and George are the ones to like rebel against her. What I loved is that you see everybody rebelling against her. You see people pulling pranks. You see the teachers allowing those pranks to annoy her. I just like that because it shows that everybody is sick of her. But instead it was just Fred and George deciding to do it. And don't get me wrong, Fred and George are a big part of the pranks and the overall rebellion, but I would have really liked it if you showed the entire school rebelling against Umbridge. And the ending really bothers me. You know, Sirius's death is done well in both the book and the movie, but what the book does better is that it really shows Harry's stages of grief. It really emphasizes that. You know, when Harry finally deals, when he's finally at peace, he finally is able to go back to his room, he just loses it. He's so angry because Sirius is gone, his last family member. He's just sad, he's angry, and then he finally decides to talk to Nearly Headless Snake. He's like, hey, maybe you can come back as a ghost. You just see the desperation in his voice. You're reading it and you can still feel the desperation in Harry's voice, and that really hits you because it's like it finally sets in that this is it. Like, he's gone, he's not coming back. And they had a really strained relationship in the 5th book, as, you know, Sirius was saying, oh, you're nothing like your dad, and it kind of bothered Harry that he kept saying that. So to see him finally gone, he realized all the regrets he had with Sirius. He wished he hung out with him more. In the movie, when he dies, he's very upset, but it's like, in a weird way, it's like Harry just moves on. Like, he's just like, oh yeah, that's kind of what happens. Let's go to the next movie. And yes, he deals with grief, but I really like the book's version more. It just shows how much Harry is desperate to get Sirius back, and it finally hits him that he's not coming back. I just wish they focused more on Harry's grief in the movie like they did in the book. Okay, so overall, guys, Order of the Phoenix is an interesting movie. It is the first movie post Goblet of Fire, it shifts the tone. It completely shifts the tone of Harry Potter from being this fun, you know, kid adventure to being a young adult dramedy in a way. So as a movie, I'm going to give it a B. It's not a bad movie. It's just Umbridge is just so unbearable that it's very difficult to watch this movie. But from a book adaptation perspective, yikes. I'm going to give it a D. They leave out so many important things. But for the most part, because they do keep the core of Harry feeling isolated, and how him and Dumbledore just aren't getting along that well, and you know how, you know, for the most part, they keep the core of the book intact, which I do appreciate. So for that, I'm going to give it a D, but man, they left out so many important details that just really, really suffered, and it just dipped the quality of this film severely. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.